welcome to a very special series called Building Equitable, Thriving Communities. Our series will explore the ongoing journey in Northeast Wisconsin to co-create equitable community well-being, including discussing the triumphs, the setbacks, and the opportunities that lie ahead. My name is Natalie Baumstead, and thank you for joining us. Green Bay, Wisconsin is a place well known in the sports world for a storied football franchise, and likely you may know it for being a large producer of things like toilet paper and cheese. But what about the people who call this place home? Our goal throughout this series is to have candid conversations around life in Northeast Wisconsin and some of the truly unique ways in which people across sectors and backgrounds are coming together to build an equitable, thriving community for all people who call this place their home. I serve as the executive director of a local nonprofit organization called Wello. Our mission at Wello is to co-create community conditions that are fair and just to drive high levels of health and well-being for all. We are driven by a future in which all people thrive, no exceptions. Joining me today on our first episode of the series are two friends, colleagues, and co-founders of two culturally specific resource centers in Green Bay, Wisconsin, We All Rise African American Resource Center and COMSA. So help me in welcoming Robin Scott and Saeed Hassan. All right, thank you, Robin and Saeed, for being here. To start out, Robin, could you provide us with an introduction to yourself and to your organization, We All Rise?
Absolutely. So my name is Robin Scott. I am Executive Director and Therapist at We All Rise African American Resource Center. Our mission is to create and help restore a vibrant African American community through uplifting, skill building, and intentionally targeting the root causes of systemic oppression. We actively promote the healing of all. So at We All Rise, we are a sexual assault and domestic violence service provider, and we try to provide resources for survivors across the board. So having access to transitional living, having access to culturally specific education programs, as well as after-school programming and crisis and intake. One of the things that we're most proud about with the work that we do is providing free mental health to marginalized folks across our community.
Beautiful, thank you, Robin.
Yeah, absolutely.
And welcome, Saeed. Can you give a little introduction of yourself and your organization as well?
Thank you so much for the opportunity. My name is Saeed Hassan. I am the co-founder and executive director of COMSA, a resource center serving immigrants and refugees. Our work is to integrate refugees and immigrants into the local community. Imagine coming to a country or to a community that you don't know their culture, you don't know their language, you don't know the way they live. That comes with a lot of challenges. So our work as an organization brings together all these elements of integration. Supporting those folks who are new into the community in job placement, employment, searching for work that they can be able to do, helping their kids register in the schools, doctor's appointment, translation work. And currently we serve predominantly folks from Somalia, Afghanistan, Ukraine, Congos, and some other countries who are new into the community. So that is basically what we do. We have both programming and services, case management, after-school program, youth mentorship program, women empowerment program, English language for adults, and much more.
Beautiful. Thank you, Saeed. So as you can see, we have two amazing individuals that are really leaders in our community around providing these services and in ways that are really accessible and really needed by members of our community. So it's a pleasure to be with you all here today, and we truly appreciate, as you can tell, the passion, the perseverance, and the leadership you really bring to advancing equity in our community. So to start with our series, we're using a lot of different words, equity being one of them. And we wanted to first kind of deconstruct some of that verbiage as we're going throughout this series for our listeners. So to first start, equity. You've probably heard it a lot, and perhaps you're not exactly sure what it is. So let's start there. By definition, health equity is the state in which everyone has a fair and just opportunity to attain their highest level of health. But what does that mean at a community level? So I'll pose that question to both of you. Robin, for our listeners, how would you describe equity?
Absolutely. Well, one, thank you for that question. And I think it's important in the world of buzzwords for us to make sure that we really do expand on and help people to fully understand the definitions. And so at the community level, I think most of us have talked about equity. Most of us really get confused equity and equality, right? And so whenever you're talking about equity from a lens of health or equity in education, all of those things, we're called to think about equity being giving people the things that they need in order for themselves to be successful. And so it's looking like from a health equity lens, it's like in order to get people through the doors of hospitals or in order to have them build up trust within their relationship with their physician, in order for them to be have informed consent or be investigative in the processes of achieving what true health equity is, you must take a multifaceted approach to that conversation. And so I have clients at the community level on all different sides. I have some folks that really feel comfortable with their relationship buildings and their local health systems. And I have some others that they have some historical mistrust, and that has been ingrained. And so in those relationships and from that regard, it's making sure that folks have what they need to be successful. And that may look like advocacy and conversations. That may look like softer introductions. That may look like having diverse doctors to explain to them about navigating the system, or diverse health workers. And so that's equity for me. It's not, making sure everybody has some things. It's making sure that people have what they need in order to be successful.
Yeah, well said.
Yeah.
Saeed, from your perspective.
Yeah, I totally wholeheartedly agree with my dear sister, Robin, in every, point of she made about equity. Equity to me is, you can't have equality without equity. You have to give access to resources to individuals in order for that, system to look more equitable. A classical example is language access in folks that we support. And we have a very large, diverse skills within the refugee and immigrant community. And oftentimes individuals think about they are broken, but they are not broke. And they come to this country and to this system, and then they are seen as some people who are less valued than others, just because they don't speak the language. And giving those individuals access to language access, or trying to help them, push them to an extent, will give them equitable access to entrepreneurship, to flourishing their lives in a country that is more, designed for folks that can only speak English and can do well. So oftentimes we have seen, and in our organization, that very, very skilled individuals, and just due to the system, they cannot be able to benefit their skills, given that they don't have that equitable access to resources. That is how I see equity.
Great examples.
Yeah.
I think for our listeners, there's an analogy that I think I often use, and it's, versus equality versus equity, right? And you think about everyone having a pair of shoes, right? And equality would be everyone has a pair of shoes. But I think about my toddler, who's 3 years old. What if that every pair of shoes was a men's size 12?
Absolutely.
Right? She's not going to fit those shoes. It actually might be unsafe for her to try to walk in those shoes, right?
Absolutely.
So equity in that situation was that every person would have the size shoes that they need to be successful, that they need to navigate the world. And so I think it's important for us, sometimes I think, like you were saying, the language, right? We can throw around these words, but the words really do matter, and the intention behind those really do matter.
Absolutely.
So when we think about, building equitable and thriving communities, it really does mean ensuring that all people that make up the community have the things that they need to attain that healthy and that well life. And so the other word, a part of our series, is thriving. So by definition, it means to flourish or to prosper. But again, I would love to get your perspectives on what does thriving mean to your community? And this time we'll start with Saeed. What does thriving mean to you?
Thriving means giving, resources that individuals need are given to them, so that they can be able to thrive for their own. So thriving, comes in our organization within the context of the refugees and immigrants. If you look at a Maslow hierarchy of needs, that's where we started life from. Survival, social, physiological needs. Safety was a concern one time. Then we moved to an area. Then when you're talking about thriving, then you go to the more especially actualization. In that spectrum, I think we define thriving as individuals who are able to easily navigate resources without being supported, be able to have that way set up for them, or working themselves towards a way that they can be able to support themselves and those that they love. Oftentimes, we haven't seen that to be the truth, given that a lot of barriers exist, a lot of the system itself doesn't allow those folks to accommodate them in the short period of time with their challenges or with their barriers that they have. One classical being the language. And I oftentimes say to people, in order for you to thrive, I think you have to do something that you like in order, so that you can push yourself to a level that you can support yourself and your family. The way the system is designed, I think for us, we are still in that survival mode. When you look at the way we have been helping our communities, but often, for those folks who came before us, thriving is what they are now looking into. Now trying to understand the system and trying to make sure that they have a way to make themselves and their families for a thriving condition for them.
Thank you. Robin, same question for you.
Yeah, so we're resilient people, right? And so I want to be strong and happy. And so, and I don't think that those two things are really separate. Like naturally, for Black and brown folks, refugees and immigrants alike, like these folks, we're resilient people that really, like you said, are capable of very extraordinary things. And we know that. It's shown throughout history. But thriving means that we have access to mental health within our community. Thriving means that our kids we can see ourselves reflected in positions of leadership here in community, across the board, at hospitals or at our school boards. And we can see ourselves seen in those positions of leadership. And so thriving is being able to afford your groceries and have money left over, pay your bills, and not be somewhere where this is your community, you find yourself responsible for it, and you're not even able to afford to live in the community that you've been building up. And so thriving is having the same access as others in your community, but defined by you and your culture, and that is the precedent, right? And so for me, thriving is me as a Black woman and leader in the community being able to help others. And so you mentioned it, and that's what made me smile, is the happiness that being able to be happy and the happiness that I find in being able to support other people. And so thriving really does. It looks differently across cultures. It looks differently across the gender spectrum. It looks differently across class, right? But we know that in order to thrive, people need to be able to afford their bills, take care of themselves, right? And it's not really this idea of extravagance. It's this idea of like safety and connectivity and like education and belonging and like, being able to help others in situations of crisis and emergency. Like that's what thriving is. And I think that all of our clients, the people that we serve every single day, that is what they prescribe to, and that's what they want to see in their lives.
I think what both of you mentioned is such an essential component to what we're talking about here today. People want and need the same things,
Yes,
but in different ways,
in different ways.
right? And at different times in our lives, we might need different things. And so how do we build up this community where, regardless of where you might find yourself now, you continue to have those opportunities to thrive, right? Because things are going to happen, right? And also, how can we start to really push on those systems,
Yes.
some of those structures and things that we know are historical in nature, so that they're not recreating the past harms, and truly moving to a place where, regardless of who you are in this community, you have that opportunity. I think that's one of our biggest challenges and opportunities moving forward.
Yeah, so thriving within my own culture too. If you look at, you know, thriving by itself, we all have what we call commons. We all have, we want a good school for our kids. We want to live healthy lives. We want to work at best jobs. We want to get a retirement. You know, all these things are what we call the community commons. So and then we see people who are doing through the system, thriving through that, but they're trying to forget their neighbors. They are not even, you know, giving their hand to the neighbors to say, help me, let me get to that thriving. So, and there's a cliche that says, if a neighbor helps each other, who needs help? So that's where I think what I've seen within the individualistic American life that is very much different from where we came from. I came from a culture where if I don't have a piece of bread, the next morning I'm thinking of going to Robin because she has a piece of bread, and she will not say no. You know, this is a culture that says it's yours and it's up to you. Your destiny is defined by you. No, my destiny is not defined by me. My destiny is defined by a concept of Ubuntu, where I am because of who we are. So that is, I think, the thriving piece. That what makes me conflict my own cultural upbringing with this new culture that I found myself in. Yeah.
Thank you.
Absolutely. So in the summer of 2023, in an effort to try to measure how are we thriving as a community, there is, Wello conducted a community-wide survey, and there's this question that we asked folks. And it says, think of a ladder. 0 being the bottom of the ladder and your worst possible life. 10 being the top of that ladder and your best possible life. Where do you see yourself today? And where do you see yourself in 5 years? So what did we find? We saw that overall in Brown County, today, around 8% of people identified as suffering, 34% as struggling, and 57.9% as thriving. In the future, 3.9% of folks thought that they would be suffering, 20.5% struggling, and 75.6% thriving. But what if we looked at this data in ways in which different people might have answered this question? To dig further, we broke down the data by folks who identified as non-white and those that identified as white, non-Hispanic. And here are the results. So today, non-white respondents said 9.4% identified as suffering versus 6.8% of white respondents. In terms of struggling, 47.3% of non-white respondents said they would be struggling versus 27.4% of white folks. And in terms of thriving today, 43.2% of non-white respondents thought they would be thriving versus 65.7% of white respondents. And you see a difference here, especially as it relates to folks who are thriving. This difference that we're seeing is called a disparity, and it's by self-identified race and ethnicity. But when we look to the future, we see a different story emerge, and specifically around thriving, where non-white and white respondents both responded with 75.5% that they would be thriving. So the future outlook of thriving is the exact same between these two groups, which is an incredible sign of hope, and why, as we continue to dive into and through this series, it is essential that we continue to work together to build an equitable, thriving community here in the Green Bay area. So when we think about this series, and we think about as we're going to continue to dive into what are the ways in which we can come together as a community, I just want to lift up this notion that there is hope right? And I feel like where there is hope, there is opportunity to create change. So what would be your reaction to these numbers? Is it in line with what you're seeing? And also maybe, what do you think that means for how we move forward? So I'll start with you, Robin.
Yeah, as you just said, Ubuntu, I am because we are. And I think that the data that you're talking about, right, it resonates. One, so there is disparities across the nation in terms of communities that are or have been historically white, and most white folks are in leadership. And we have right now population change and growth, where our school district here is like one of the most diverse in the nation, right? Because of all the different cultures and populations that are attending the schools. And so it's really like, that is absolutely in line with what we're seeing in community, where people really they're struggling. Like, I think that the African-American community median household income is $23,000 to the $64,000 median household income for the white households in our county. That's one of the largest disparities next to, I believe, the Bronx of New York in the country. And so oftentimes when people think Wisconsin, they don't necessarily think Black folks, brown folks, and disparities, but there are many of us here that are in Wisconsin and that are up against a growing and changing community. And so as I think about one, like what the data is telling us, it's telling us that people are really struggling, people are hungry, people are dealing with surging in prices for homes here, people that are from this community and have grown up here. Tells you that people have gone through a lot of mental health, issues, especially after we just went through a global pandemic. And so folks here have been dealing with even more issues on top of the other economic disparities that exist and the education disparities that exist. However, when it comes to that process of Ubuntu, and when you account for culture, and when you account for history and you account for resilience, our folks are forever loving and accepting, have deep faith. Deep faith in our ancestors, deep faith in nature, and deep faith in the world, deep faith in God, all those things. And so people that are walking alongside other very beautiful, resilient, incredible individuals, they're gonna have hope, And when you have a community that we have not just our 2 resource centers, but other culturally specific resource centers, like Casa Alba is a Hispanic resource center that's local here. And we are all very connected, and we're doing work with one another. And that gives our people hope, So much, like you just talked about, the very individualistic society. We have committed to making some shifts in that. And so therefore the people that we're serving, they see that, and that gives them even more hope. So the data is very much so in line with who we are as people. Believing in a better tomorrow, and also just consistently working hard. And so what you can't deny when you get up every day and go and work and grind for your family and teach your kids is that there are better days to come, because you feel it in you every single day,
Absolutely.
Well said.
So within the context of refugees and immigrants, thank you so much for elaborating more on that. It is more on, that we base our thriving or, better tomorrow, that my kids will be better than me. They started life here, they understood the system way better than I do. So the prognosis is they will be better than me. And for folks who are, more specifically, refugees and immigrants are very hopeful communities. We came to these countries late in our lives, and so failure is not an option for us. We are not defined by failure. But the only thing that is obstacles, or anything that prevents them to thrive or to be successful or to be hopeful, is when the system works against them in a way that they cannot penetrate through and things like language, I have been mentioning this a lot, and cultural, social cultural barriers, that's what we call it in a more decent way. So if those things are removed, and when you talk to single mothers who were in this country for 8 years, raising kids, boys and girls, and you understand how hopeful they are for tomorrow for their kids. That testament to our own mothers who raised us in the refugee camp. My mother was talking about better tomorrow for her kids when we were in the refugee camp in Kenya, and then the same goes for the mothers who are here right now. Ukrainian mothers whose kids are here and the father is back home. Afghan, families who are, separated, and maybe when the mother is here, the father is back home, or the father is here waiting his family to join. All this, when you look and talk to them and look the world from their lenses, they are very hopeful for tomorrow. Hopeful to an extent that things is going to change. But in practical terms, the system how it is, the way it's laid, I think that we need to disrupt by advocating for these groups and say, I don't think this is where the curve is going. We have to turn that curve, because that's not going to a better direction. When you look at disparities among racial inequality, I came from a country where race was not a problem. And when you come to a country where you are defined by your race, regardless of your your education background, I was confronted by a friend from Nigeria, and he's doing his second PhD, and he said, this is the only way he can be able to get a job, that he has to show multiple PhDs, a better decent paying job. So I think the system itself has to be a way that is going to be accommodating, so to speak, in order for us to come to the line, to make it that line curved, or to disrupt altogether. I think that is,
it needs to be disrupted.
Yeah.
There's something though. 2 PhDs and then the debt that comes, the debt in the system that, that comes with that. You're working hard just to be able to have a good enough job, and a loan, the student loans, all of those things, that plays into it. I hope my eyes smiled today. My eyes smiled when you mentioned young people though, because I think that is really, really just our young people, they give us so much hope. The young people today, y'all, they different.
Yeah.
They're different. Like when I'm talking to middle schoolers and high schoolers, and even younger people, they just have such a keen understanding of connection and belonging and acceptance and appreciation for each other and across cultures, that that is another thing that gives us so much hope, because they are different. Just educated, inclusive, and taking on concepts that our ancestors could have only dreamed about.
Yeah, I usually get energy from them. The after-school program, and I sit with young folks, young kids from Ukraine, Afghanistan. I talk to them. The kiddos who could not be able to speak English a year ago, now barely speak their own language.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's how they are first learning, and they're forced to do that because actually that's the way for them to survive. That's how I started helping my mom when I was in the refugee camp. I started working at the age of 10, just because that is reading letters from my mom, trying to understand that there is a need within the family. So when someone asks me, when have you started working for the community? I said, I started 10 years ago, when I was 10 years old. Yeah. So young folks, there's a future for them. I think but however, I still want to mention that actually, the system changed for the better in order for them to be successful,
It's our responsibility, right? All of us.
Yep.
We're not, supposed to leave this for our kids to fight. There's things that we can do right now.
Absolutely. Thank you both. Very insightful. And I think we have a lot of lessons that we can learn from both of you. And we're really, really fortunate. I can't underscore that enough. In Green Bay, Wisconsin, we have some of the most insightful, thoughtful leaders here who are really changing things for the better and creating real impact. I don't know how often you hear this, but it is very, very important that we have leaders like you here, and we're very grateful that we are able to really be beneficiaries of your thoughtfulness and your leadership.
Thank you.
So finally today, we wanted to shift our focus to a worldwide event that has really challenged us in building equitable, thriving communities. We're talking about the global COVID-19 pandemic. We happen to be recording this exactly 4 years from the week that COVID-19 was declared a global pandemic. It's been 4 long years. And so Robin, Saeed, how are you doing?
We are back to where we have started before COVID-19. I think during COVID-19, it was very bad to see a lot of people died due to the COVID-19. A lot of our people, the conditions they had, due to the conditions they had, unfortunately, they could not be able to make it to the end, or they could not make it today, if I put that way. So COVID-19 actually exacerbated and brought about existing barriers that our communities had. We remember when we get together as 3 organizations, our coming together wasn't by choice, it was by necessity. We came together to save the lives of those who are struggling on a daily basis. We came together to think daily, answering all midnight emails, phone calls, conferences. I try to bring together resources for those who are less fortunate. And, for me, that was an opportunity for the world to see those who are suffering, who are the tip of the iceberg in terms of suffering scale, are seen during that time. There was a light on top of them that showed their challenge. And right now we are calling it life to normal, back to normal. But again, those who are struggling before are still struggling. Health inequities is still there. Challenges to food security is still there. Folks cannot be able to pay for their rents at this time. So that's as I said in the beginning, we just pick it up from where we started before COVID-19. Again, I'm hopeful that we 3 of us are working together, and we are trying to make sure that we are working to make sure those folks are not forgotten. The world have seen them, but we are making sure that we are here for them to solve the issues, even though it can be small, but we are working to make sure that we are here to support them. Robin?
Yeah. So I'm focused. I'm more focused than ever. I feel like I know that it's part of like American society to like keep going, just keep going, move forward, look for what's ahead. And while I think that in some theory can be aspirational, what inspires me is being in the present, but then also understanding our history, right? When we're constantly in a rush, we can forget our history. So let us not forget, So 4 years, what does that mean? That means that we're 4 years later, but there was so much that when folks had to slow down and actually be present with their neighbors, what was going on with the cultures of their community, we all learned a lot across cultures, right? And so we learned that Black and brown people in our neighborhoods, not just something euphemistic and far, we learned that the people in our neighborhoods were disproportionately dying and disproportionately impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic because of overcrowding, because they're more likely to be on public transportation, because they're more likely to live with multiple generations and have that responsibility that is not individualistic, like Saeed talked about. And so let us not forget the things that we learned during that time. And so I'm a lifelong learner, and I have been intentional about staying up with that, right? And so while the world continues to tell us, and some of that is done intentional to keep folks going, keep folks working towards the capitalist society that we work in, and that we live in and have evolved through. And it's important to be intentional. And so everything that I learned during the COVID-19 pandemic, everything that people around me experienced during the COVID-19, that still sits right here for me, because I know that by understanding that, right, we will be active in building solutions so that it never happens that way again. Even if there is a global pandemic, we will be more equipped. We'll understand that we are a part of the emergency response. We'll understand how technology can give way to connection and less isolation, if that was to ever happen again. And well, actually, let me not say that, right? Because I don't even want to speak. Words have power. And so we would never want to see that happen again in our lifetime. But one of the things that I think is really important is that we don't forget. When society tells you to keep moving forward, only look ahead, I urge people to do a combination of those things, because for some of us that don't have underlying conditions, for some of us that have regular access to resources, for food and for housing and for health, it's very easy for us to continue to go on with our life, right? And forget about the others. But we as a community, we're only as good as the weakest person in our community, right? We're only as good as the person that is struggling the most. They are a reflection of us too. And so when we go to the margins, and I always do that, like I always say, people, if you go to the margins and put services and support behind the folks that are most vulnerable in your community, everybody benefits, right? And so that's why it's really important that all of us, that we stay committed, that we carry the knowledge forward, and that we continue to spread that. It is not a negative, right? People teach us sometimes that if you bring up that old stuff, right, then people can't look forward. The reason why we were not ready is because people hadn't brought up the old stuff, right? Because we weren't prepared for an emergency, and not to be like living on the edge or walking on eggshells or scared, but to be prepared, to be well equipped, to understand that we're ever changing and ever evolving, so that when like things like this happen, we are prepared to work together, you know? And so while I'm very thankful and feel blessed that we were in position to build team efforts, because that's really what it took to survive, for some of us that did survive, because many people died, right? Right here in our communities, right here in our jail systems, right here on our streets, many people died. And so it's beautiful that we had this, that we developed this, right? And it'll always be a part of our history, but let us not forget.
And just, you know, to piggyback on what just Robin said, for the context of the refugees and immigrants, they came out of chaos. You know, they survived to be in this country. So that was similar to COVID-19 pandemic, like you are in between death and life. So making it to this country was that, you know, horrific. Coming here, and then the COVID-19 was a common challenge, as I said, this was a common problem. Then they, you know, became like, you know, one of the way that they, you know, their resiliency, I think Robin mentioned a lot of times that resiliency, they emerged out of that. And through, you know, sharing and togetherness, as Robin mentioned it, that communal thing coming together, actually, those were some of the things that I have learned, that we can always have a hopeful community that can support one another in the times of trials like COVID-19 times. And personally, as an organization, I think the support of the local, you know, Samaritan support that we have seen, that was also you know, a hopeful moment for us as an organization serving immigrants. Just like the times of Afghan arrivals, where I could easily receive calls from nowhere, people asking me, I have a house, 2-bedroom for a family. If they want to take, I want to stay with my daughter for the period they can be able on their feet. So that sense of generosity actually instilled us that even though there's a lot of challenges and barriers, but there's hopefulness and generosity out there. And sometimes it is said in Africa that there's a lot of people, but there are few human beings. And that's when we have seen those human beings coming out.
For our listeners, thinking about the things that you have learned and you've already shared about COVID-19, what would be a way in which people could continue to support your agencies? Because I think you mentioned something, Saeed, around the generosity, right? There's this human thing that happens in time of crisis where people really come together. And I think what you both have really spoke very profoundly about was we can't forget the reason we're here, right? And the history that has brought us to this place where the folks that you're serving are disproportionately impacted by COVID-19. So how can we continue to kind of push and have that pressure to continue to try to find ways of solving some of these issues once and for all? So if for our listeners, is there something that you would suggest as maybe a way in which to start being a part of that solution?
So I'll just jump right in. I want to say feel it. Like it was really, really, really eye-opening to me that for the first time, like things went on pause for so many people. And that pause gave way to a lot of different things, right? One, we've seen that on a negative, it caused more social isolation, exacerbated existing mental health that was already very rampant across the United States, right? Across the world, essentially. But another thing it did, it gave people opportunity to just sit in the now and to be present with what was happening, what was going on across the globe, what was going on in their communities, and to be present. And so I'll never forget that time because I was working the entire time, but I got to watch as other people expanded their horizons in ways that I had never seen in my lifetime. And so their eyes opening to things like the uprising and the Black Lives Matter movement and the things that were happening that we know. There's George Floyd and rest in paradise, brother, Rodney King, though, and the many other Black people that have been murdered. That has been something that has always been on the front of TV. And so for the Black community, that wasn't a shock, but what gave rise to it is that, for 8 minutes and 46 seconds, people got to watch as a man had his life taken away from him and to be murdered during that time. And it gave them a sense of still. And at the same time, we all felt as people, as mankind within this country, as humans, we all felt like there was this disease, there was this virus that could steal us away from our families, things that were so precious to all of us at any given time, and we didn't know what it was. We hadn't heard of it. We'd never seen our world shut down. And so for a minute, I felt a little bit closer to some of my more diverse neighbors in that type of way. And that's not the type of feeling that we would want to have, It does not have to take trials for us to triumph. And if we can remember that, if we can hold on, if we can feel, truly just feel, slow down and feel what's going on around you, feel out what's happening in your community, and think about the most vulnerable people all the way up to the most best, and recognize that there's enough out here for all of us, right? This is not a competition. The world makes us feel like we ought to be in a rush. We ought to forget that there's some sort of competition. But if we stay present, the everyday people here in our community, Black, white, Hispanic, Hmong, those are the folks, the individuals on the ground were the ones who made it happen for the people that were most vulnerable. So let us not be commercialized. Let us not think, this hope that those few that have this, that, and that. And that is why so much information is being pushed at us on the internet and on our phones, right? And with this advanced technology, while it's beautiful, if used unconsciously, it can be toxic. And we can recognize that we're being programmed to be just remote, full, like micro scrolling, shorter attention spans, all of those things. If we can just be present and we can feel, we can build a beloved community. Because it was everyday people that brought in the food. It was teachers that was like, I'm not supposed to go to this school, but I got a classroom full of snacks. And I'm hearing that there's some of our kids are without food right now. And they were the ones who were doing what they have to do to make it happen. It was church folks, you know? How many of our elders from local churches that pulled up with bread and produce? It was organizations like Wello, you know, and COMSA, and our togetherness that we were innovative, you know, by listening to the CDC and being present with the times. We were innovative in our strategies to be able to serve those most vulnerable, to be able to get to herd immunity, to be able to get people from out of the social isolation that was causing, it was essentially rocking people's lives, you know? It was everyday folks. And so my best advice is for folks to just feel. And then the best way, as cliche as it may sound, that's the best way. Because what I told people during that time is I said, with the dollars that's coming in around this time and the emergency response, because we're out here and we're on the ground, let me make sure we get a car for our future survivors. Let us make sure we get a food truck so that we will be able to feed people and to feed ourselves in those cases of needs. Because once this thing starts rolling again, we have been so programmed to just keep going, whether it's the jobs, you know, working and being in school more than we're being present with ourselves. And so that's really important. The best thing that people can do for my organization is to feel, because a one-time donation sometimes can change lives for a program and things like that. But people that feel, that come out and see, they are more likely to develop a relationship that sustains. And so it may not be $1,000 that gets donated. It may be consistently every time a person goes to the grocery store, they don't forget that We All Rise has the needs for hygiene products or, you know, sanitary products for our clientele. And it's by them feeling, by them seeing, by them slowing down, that's what's gonna best help our organization. While we accept the one-time, you know, support all the time, I want people here to feel.
And to be in and with community.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. I think I wholeheartedly agree with Robin. People to come, you know, it was coming together and feeling and survive and helping those who are less fortunate during the COVID-19. Right after COVID-19, I think we need to also continue support those who are less fortunate. And for us, actually, is just like Robin said, come and experience our cultures, come and see what we are doing. Come and, you know, talk to a refugee who recently arrived from Ukraine or from Afghanistan or from Somalia or from Congos. Try to understand what they need. Come and become a friend, because they need that hope within themselves. They need to make a friend within the community. You know, come and talk to them. You know, come and help us with after-school program. You know, there's a need. You know, there's a huge need of volunteering and helping those folks who doesn't have transportation to and from after-school program, transportation to get groceries, you know, transportation to get to work, you know, help, that constant connection with our resourceful organizations will make things better. I'll stop there.
There's like a saying, like, right, where people oftentimes forget to help. Right? And so we're saying right here together, help those that are less fortunate. And some people will be like, you know, they just need to pull themselves up by the bootstraps or work hard if they grind harder. What the pandemic showed us is that those were the people that were grinding harder. They were the ones that were making sure that meat got to your house, right? They were the ones that were in these large plants to make sure that we had what we needed at the supermarkets. They were the ones that were risking their lives at the hospitals and at the nursing homes, serving our elders in community, right? Like they were the ones. And so let us never forget. Let us never forget what it revealed to us. It was right in our face that those people that we're talking about that are less unfortunate, that because so many Americans are one paycheck away from poverty, right? Like, and then so easily do we forget the tax that was even put on some of the middle class people during that time. People that have like normally been okay, they've had a little bit of savings, but those are the people that are out there in the community that were more likely to help the people that were less fortunate, more likely to give every single day. So that's why I keep saying that, let us not forget, because the people that risked their lives, the people that were more likely to die during the global pandemic were the people that were in those larger, from factories to hospitals to those larger units, outside of the ones with the underlying health conditions. They were some of those folks too. Those are the hardest working people that give way to the rich.
Right.
You know, they're oftentimes the ones that when we don't have them, we don't even survive ourselves. And so help them out, help them to be stronger, help them to be better, and just to realize that all of this feels better when they're supported.
Thank you both. I think you made excellent points and ways in which the community, I think what I've heard here too is there's a welcome invitation. Come, be part of community, understand and learn and be with in the joy, right? And in the trials and the tribulations. This is how we build an equitable, thriving community, when we're working together and we're, instead of othering, right? It's joining together. And really, I feel like to both of your points, coming out and feeling that and being in community. You know, one of the things we also say at Wello is you just can't skip those steps. You can't just go to the end, right? Oftentimes, I think, you know, in media, we see the building that was built. Look how beautiful it is. How, right? Who? What was that process? So I feel like part of this series is also to help kind of give voice to some of what that process looks like in community, the things that are going well, the things that are still very challenging, and ways in which our listeners and other community members can really get involved and be a part of a solution. So thank you very much.
You're welcome.
So in our next episodes, we are going to dive into some of these stories of triumph, really sharing ways in which the community and partners have really come together to support those most impacted, and especially during the COVID-19 pandemic. As well as we are going to dive into some more of the continuing opportunities that really lie ahead for us, not only here in Northeast Wisconsin, but really across our nation and around the world. So we hope that you'll stay with us. Until next time, thank you for joining us on Building Equitable, Thriving Communities. Thank you.
Historically, within the Black community, we feel like that things that are tested on us.